In this video, we're going to give you an introduction to Onshape. Onshape is a CAD, a computer-aided design called CAD product that is available on the web and is free of charge for students and kind of hobbyists. If you're going to go into building parts for your company, then they will charge you for it. So it is much like SolidWorks, but all runs in the browser. So I'm thinking it's a great little tool for us to use in robotics class to help us understand how we can model things in a CAD program to help us build robots. Now, this will only be an introduction. We will build a phone stand that will look like this. To be more accurate, we will build the base of the phone stand, just the part down at the bottom. Our steps are going to be that, first of all, we will create an Onshape account. This assumes you do not have one already. We will create an Onshape document, and then we're going to sketch the base of the phone stand and build the part as you saw it in the previous slide. Then what I want to do is to show you how you can take a different part. In this case, we will use one of the parts that we use on a robot, a Tetrix C-channel part that has a hole pattern in it already. We will import that part, use that to locate the holes in the base of the phone stand, and then drill those holes out, or make those holes go all the way through, so that we can have something in the center of the base to be able to put that supporting pole that goes up to hold the phone. The final step then will be to provide a drawing of the phone base so that we can take that out to the shop, know where all of the thickness, where all the holes are, what the thicknesses of the block is, how much we're supposed to mill out, and this would be a typical thing that you would provide to the shop if you were working in a company, and tell the machinist out in the shop to go build that. That's all of the steps that we'll be going through. Now, let's jump over to the browser. We'll bring up the browser, and we're going to go to onshape.com. And we can click here, and you can come to create an account. You can create one of two accounts, and it's been a while since I've done this, so I'm not sure of all of the questions you get asked. The simplest one is to create one as if you were a hobbyist or a maker. There you've got a plan that is free for all of your public documents, anything that is not for commercial use. There's not any storage limit, and you have view-only access to private documents. So for this class, that is more than enough features that we can go ahead and use it. You need to put in your name, first name, last name, and an email address. I'm going to go back here, and the student one asks for a little bit more information. It asks for your name, and are you a student or an educator? In your case, you'll be a student. And then it wants to know what level you are. You're in K through 12. And there was some indication that they needed to verify that. So I'm not sure whether there's a additional step there or not, but either one of these would be an acceptable way for you to create an account. Now, I'm going to go back because I already have an account, and I'm going to hit the sign in. This is what you will do after you have set up your account. Turns out that I was logged on just a few minutes ago, so it did not prompt me for a username and password. When you go in, you will be prompted for a username and password. Enter that, and then you'll come to this screen. Our first step is we're going to come up to Create, and we're going to create a document. And I'm going to call this Mill Practice. Now, this brings up the opening screen for creating a document in Onshape. You can see that it is created down at the bottom, a blank part studio. That is where you will put your parts. And we have an assembly tab, but of course there's nothing in the assembly right now. The tools that we'll be using are along the top of the browser page. And it has created three planes for us: the top, the front, and the right. And then it's also got this little thing right here, which is the origin of all of our sketching that we'll do. I'm going to put this part on the front plane. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference where you put it. You just need to be able to kind of pick a plane that will make sense for the type of part that you're going to model. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to come over here to the cube, and I'm going to hit the front. That will bring it around so that I'm looking directly at the front plane. We can still see these lines in here, so I'm going to hit the P key, and that will get rid of the planes for me. Now I've got a blank slate that I can start sketching my part on. Sketching is an important concept in Onshape, and it means that I'm going to build something that looks sort of like the part that I want to build, and then I'm going to put some dimensions on it to get it exactly to match the part that I want to build. So in my case, I want to start by building a rectangle and then putting some dimensions on it, and then later on we'll put some thickness on it. So I'm going to come up to the sketch, hit the sketch guy. He's going to come up and say, what plane do you want to sketch on? We want to sketch on the front plane. We'll click on that. And then now we've got the first sketch available. The first thing we want to do is come up and get a rectangle. And we'll come down here and we'll just draw a rectangle on the screen at any old place, and it doesn't matter at this point what the dimensions are, because the first thing it's going to do is ask us for the dimensions. That part needs to be 2 inches. We want 2 inches across the top, and we want 2 inches down the side. Okay, now now it has built the sketch exactly the way I want it with exactly the dimensions. So let's review how I did that, because I'm clicking a mouse and you can't tell what I'm doing for mouse clicks. So I'll show you what I do, and then we'll go back and kind of cover some of the mouse clicks. So I went up and selected the rectangle. I came down, clicked, put the mouse at a particular spot on the screen, drug it out the way I wanted it, let go, and then now it's asking me for the dimensions. So I put in 2, and I put in 2, and that was another rectangle. Okay, now I don't want that guy, so I'm gonna now to get out. Now what did it just do here? It drew another rectangle for me because I still had the rectangle selected at the top. I don't want that. I want to hit this escape key, and when I do, notice this guy goes away. So when I hit the escape key, he's no longer selected. Now I can drag these guys, and I can hit the delete key, and I didn't get them all, so I hit the delete key again, and they've gone away. Okay, so now I have sketched a rectangle, in this case a square, that is 2 inches by 2 inches. That's the dimensions of the base that I'm interested in. So I'm going to hit the green box. Now what I've got is something that has no thickness. It's just a rectangle that is 2 inches by 2 inches. So what I need to do now is give it some depth, some thickness. I'm going to come up to extrude, and I'm going to, it first of all wants to know what object you want to extrude. That's what it's sitting on here. I'm going to click on this, and by default, it extrudes something 1 inch. That's exactly what I want. If I had wanted 0.75, notice when I hit the enter key, this will get smaller. It shrunk it. And I can come over here. When I go back to 1, it'll grow back. So that's how you give it give this part some thickness. Now I actually have a 3D part, and I can hit the green box to say I'm done with that. I like what I got. I can come over here and I can be looking at it directly from the front. Okay, now let me go back to this guy, and we're going to go back to this picture, and we'll look at what we're interested in the picture. The base of the part is 2 inches by 2 inches, and the thickness is 1 inch thick. But I've got this recessed area in the center that I need to model now. Let's take that, and we'll come back over here. When I'm looking at this part, I need to draw another sketch on this front surface so that I can describe what I want to recess into the base. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say a new sketch. That will put a sketch on this plane right here, on this surface, sorry. Previously I had to tell it what surface I wanted because when I started I didn't have any surface selected. In this case I had selected a surface, so I can just hit the new sketch and it'll come up. Now what we want to do is I want to offset this edge by 1/8 of an inch all the way around, because the thickness of the material I'm going to leave is 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to select this. This is just left clicking, left click, left click, left click, and I'm going to use a different tool at the top. That tool is called offset. I'm going to select that, and it gave me an offset, but it gave me an offset the wrong direction. This is offsetting it to the outside. I want to offset it to the inside, and I only want to offset it 1/8 of an inch. And so somehow I got a one on here that is 1/4 of an inch. So we will delete that guy. Now what I'm doing is selecting these lines and then hitting the delete key. Okay. Now I'm going to also, this guy is a little bit hard, oops, escape. This guy's a little hard to read, so I'm going to bring him out here so I can see him a little bit better. Now, if you remember our picture, come back over here. If you remember this picture, we've got a circle, a fillet in the edge, because that is where we use the cutter bit. That's the diameter of the cutter bit. So we're going to come back over here, and we're going to get the fillet. I'm going to hit that, come up to the corners. It's going to give me a 1/4 inch fillet, which is probably about what we want. We'll use a 1/2 inch bit to be cutting this material out. So a 1/4 inch radius would be great. We'll do it there, we'll do it there, we'll do it there. And now I have a sketch of the area that I want to remove from the middle of this base. So I can hit the green arrow, and again, that's just a sketch on this surface. So now what I'm going to do is select that. I'm going to go up to extrude, but in this case, you see what the default is? The default is to extrude it out 1 inch, and that's not what I want. What I want is to go in, but I only want to go in 0.125. So now I have removed, whoops, I want to remove, I should have removed, an 1/8 of an inch material out of the center of this, and I hit the green checkbox. I come look at the front, and that's exactly what I want to see. It is, I now have my base that is 2 inches along the top, 2 inches along the side. This right here is an 1/8 of an inch. This recessed area is an 1/8 of an inch. And that is what I want to see for my part. Now, I'm going to go do 2 more things before we get through, or before we move on to the next step here. I'm going to come down and rename this. This is going to be called the base, and I'm going to come up and rename this. I'm going to call it the base. All right, so now what I want to do is put some holes in here. But instead of just trying to bore holes in here and locating them with some dimensions, I want to assume that I'm trying to get this base to hook up to some other part that I've got in my in the set of parts that I'm trying to build. So to do that, I'm going to import. I'm going to come down to the plus sign, and we're going to say import. And I'm going to import this Tetrix part. Tetrix is, of course, the name of the parts that we use on the robots we build. It's going to say I'm going to import that. Are you cool with that? And it's going to bring in 2 additional tabs. One tab has got some information in it that just tells you where you got this part from that you imported. We're going to delete that. We don't care about that. The other tab actually shows me the part that I brought in. So now I have this, which is C channel. We'll just leave it as part 1 here. I've got my base, and what I'm going to do is make an assembly and put these 2 pieces together, and then I will edit the base. In other words, I'll locate the holes in the base given the Tetrix part, using the Tetrix part as a template. To do that, we're going to insert. We're going to insert the base, and we're going to insert the Tetrix part. And we will put them right here, and we're going to say okay. Now what I've got is I am in an assembly. I'm in assembly 1, and what I need to do is to tell this assembly where these parts belong relative to each other. To do that, you use a mating connector. We're going to use this fasten mating connector, and I'm going to put right here in the center of this base, I'm going to put 1 mating connector. Over here on this C channel, I'm going to use the other mating connector. And we're going to line those two guys up. As you can tell, we've now got the C channel right in the center of this block that we built. So we're happy with that. We're going to say okay. We're going to turn it around here. I'm now looking at the back of it. Now what I want to do is I want to edit this base in the context of this Tetrix part. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say edit in context. That will take me back to the base, but it's going to show me the shadow of this Tetrix part located exactly where I'd located it in the assembly. Kind of cool. So now what I'm going to do is take this surface of my part, again I'm on the back side of it, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to put a new sketch here. On this sketch, I'm going to use the holes that I've got in this part. I'm going to click right here. I'm going to click right here, right here, right here, right here. And I'm going to come up and say use. In my drawing that I've got, in my sketch that I've got, I'm going to use these holes as an example. Okay, now I'm happy with that sketch. I'm going to come back. And now what I'm going to do is extrude. And what I want to extrude is these parts right here that I had drawn in the sketch. You notice that the default was to extrude these out, extrude these away from the base. That's not what I want to do. I want to use this arrow to go in the opposite direction. And I also want to remove. I don't want to add something. I want to remove so I can make these holes. Now, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to define this a little bit differently than we did in the past. In the past, we used this blind, which is the default. Blind says, just look at this dimension and do the extrude and do extrusion or do the removing based on the dimensions that I put in. In this particular case, I want to extrude up to the face. And I'm going to spin the part around and I'm going to select this face so that the model knows that I want to come all the way to this face. If in the future I define the distance, the thickness of this part to be greater or to be less, then the model will still work because I've said I want to come to this face. If I had made this extrusion be 1 inch and then I decided to make this part 1.5 inches, I'd have to come back and fix this because the hole would only go down 1 inch deep into the material. So this is something good to keep in mind. You have to understand the intent of what you're trying to model. And my intent is that I want these holes to come all the way through the material to this surface. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to come back. I'm going to click on that. And now, if I go look at the front of this, I've got holes in here, and those holes are the dimensions, the diameter of them are the dimensions of the part I had, and the location is exactly that part. So if I spin around here, we can see that part, and we're good. If I come back up here to this, and I hit Go to Assembly, now I go over to the assembly, and you see the part before did not have the holes in it, but because of the editing I did, it's now got holes in 4 of the locations and in the center. So that's exactly the configuration that I want to have. Now, let's go look at this. We'll come back to the base. because there is one thing that I need to do to finish this off. I have not built a drawing of this base. As a side note, notice that when I came back over here to the parts tab that's got the base, my channel that I had on the back isn't shown. It was only shown because I had gone into the assembly and I was editing this base in the context of the parts the way they were assembled. When I come back to the base itself, then that part is gone, and that's exactly what I want, because this time I need to go in and build a drawing of this. So we're going to come down to the base tab. We're going to right click and we're going to say create drawing of the base. Now what we're going to do is create a drawing with no views to start with, but we'll add the views as we go here. So we're going to say okay. It's going to bring up a blank sheet of paper, and it will give us the first view that it thinks we might want, and in this case it is one that we want. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to drag down here, and we're going to click again because it just rotated to give me the front view and to give me a side view. Those are the two things that that I want to be able to lay out the dimensions on this part. Now, the other thing that I want is, let's see here, how do that one, I didn't want that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get sidetracked for just a little minute because I did want this view properties to come up. I did want to come down here, and I'm going to make this, you can see that you can scale your drawing at different scales. And I want to make it twice the size just so it's easier to kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm happy with that. Now what I got to do is come over here, select this guy, hit the delete button, we'll get him out of there. I will take this, drag it down a little bit, and I will leave that guy right here. Okay, now we're ready to put some dimensions. Dimensions, you go up here to the dimension tool, and we're going to start off by dimensioning line to line. We will click on that. We will come to this line, and we will come to this line, and we'll put a dimension. That is 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to come to this line and to this line. This guy is going to be 2 inches. I'm going to come to this line. This should be 1 inch, and it is. I'm going to do one other thing here. I'm going to hit the escape key to get out of dimension because I just happen to remember that what I want to do is show hidden lines in this drawing. This is the hidden line for that recessed area that we're cutting out. And one of the things I need to do is I need to go from this line to this line to tell you that I want to cut out 1/8 of an inch of that material that you can see cut out up here. Okay, now we're pretty good with everything located here. I'm going to come up and change the dimensions so that I go from a point to a line. And I'm going to come from this point, the center of this circle, down to this line. And that's going to be that big. I'm going to come to the center of this circle, down to this line, and that's going to be 1 inch because we located that right in the center. The center down to this line, and that's going to be that distance. And now what I need to do is to get the dimensions going this direction. So I'm going to come from here to here. That will be 1 inch. I'm going to come from here to here. That will be 1.685 from here to here. That's there. And then I'm going to go from here to here to let you know that this piece is 2 inches in this direction, and we've already said it is 2 inches in that direction. Okay, we're getting close. Now what I need to do is come back up here, and I'm going to go to a diameter. We need to identify the diameter of that hole. We need to identify the diameter of that hole. And one more thing, I need to come up here and do a radius, and we need to identify the radius of that arc. You may look at this and say, well, but we didn't identify the radius of this, 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 this. It's a standard dimensioning practice that when things are typical, meaning all of the arcs are the same here, you only dimension it in one spot. That's the same reason I only dimensioned one of these circles. All of these circles have the same diameter, so I just dimensioned one of them. Okay, now we have a drawing that we can print out, send out to the shop, and a mechanic out in the shop, a machinist out in the shop could make that. Or you could go out in the shop and be able to make it also. So you don't have to, so now we've kind of finished the phone base that we were going to model here. In Onshape, you don't have to save anything because everything is saved on the web. So when you come back over here to Onshape, you'll now see in the documents that were created by you, you'll see something called mill practice. And if you needed to go back into that, if you didn't get done the first time you were in, you go back in, click on it, it comes back up. You can come over here, make whatever changes you want to make. Come back over here and make an update to the drawing, and you are good. So that concludes the demo, the first introduction to Onshape that will kind of get you started. There is a lot more that you can learn about Onshape, but this will get you started in putting together some models.